Hey everybody, this is Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. One of the great benefits that our viewers have here, Erik, is you obviously travel the world regularly on a frequent basis. And obviously your command of history and how it applies to geopolitics today is terrific. But when you're in the field, it gives us a chance to get sort of a picture window into where you've been and what you've been up to. That's why people do not want to miss this segment, as we're going to talk about El Salvador and your recent experience there. Now, just as a reminder, the president of El Salvador, Bukele, was the first Salvadoran president to win re-election since 1944. And he did so because he got tough on gangs. He was first elected in 2019 and then reelected in 2023. And he has transformed their culture, their society, the country, because he was able to address violence. In fact, he was able to cut, in 2022, he cut the murder rate in half in El Salvador. So he has transformed that country, and I think served as at least one example of leadership that should be studied and examined. But Erik, you were just on the ground. I'm dying to get this field report from you and what you observed and studied there in El Salvador.
Thanks, Mark. I first really learned of President Bukele when he came to CPAC. It was before his last election. And I happened to be back behind the stage when his motorcade arrived. And within seconds of his motorcade arriving, there was literally hundreds of El Salvadoran kitchen workers and convention staff that came out of nowhere with handmade signs, and they truly loved and adored that guy. It's amazing because we've had so many El Salvadoran immigrants to America, some legal, some would be considered illegal, but they came because of the massive violence and chaos and carnage in their country caused by gangs. There was a communist-sponsored insurgency called the FMLN, Farabundo Marti Liberation Nacional, in the 80s, sponsored by the Nicaraguans, and the U.S. helped put that down. A lot of those leftist guerrillas ended up becoming gangbangers, which became Mara Salvatrucha 13, MS-13, which spread its tentacles from Latin America up into the United States, doing drugs, extortion, kidnapping, all the bad elements of organized crime. And it flowed freely between El Salvador and the United States. And even if the United States in the early 2000s got tougher on some of the illegal migration stuff, it pushed people back to El Salvador. The gangs truly took over the country to the point that they were considered almost a tax on the economy of $3.5 billion, about 20 to 30% of the GDP of El Salvador. So Bukele gets elected. His family is actually they're Palestinians. And mother's Catholic, father Palestinian Arab, raised there, but he's elected. He had built a marketing and PR firm. He gets elected back in 2019 on a law enforcement, law and order platform. And he did. And he literally went to war with the gangs. And, these gang members really self-identified. To be in the gang, they have to murder somebody. And they have very obvious chest tattoos, face tattoos, makes it very, very easy. And they ended up they have wrapped up almost 70,000 gang members, about 1% of the population. This is coming in on the helicopter. This is out in a remote part of the country. They wanted them to be away from any part of the population, and so thus more difficult to get any kind of help from the local population. There's a lot of volcanoes in El Salvador, and this one is downhill from one, so if the volcano blows up, it's probably going to take the prison with it. Again, they built this in 7 months. It is a proper maximum security prison. It's capable of holding 40,000 gang members. This one that you see in the video holds 14 or 40,000 now. There's an X-ray video. That's literally a full body X-ray that each inmate gets before they're entered into the prison. So even if they've swallowed drugs or weapons, in their digestive system, the X-ray sees it, so that there's no foreign objects that are make it to the inmates. All the guards inside the prison have masks on, so that it's impossible for the inmates to identify who they're dealing with. You'll see a video of the whole of their isolation pods, where members that gang members that misbehave go there in isolation, and they usually don't last much longer than 72 hours before they're begging to be let out. There's no lateral light. There's a hole in the floor for a toilet and a trough of water to draw from, and that's it. There's a chair shown in the picture that the chair is removed if there's an inmate in there. So it is extremely sparse. The inmates are in those pods, as you see pictured, for 23 and a half hours a day. They're let out into the main hall, only the main hall, never outside in the daylight or in the open sky. They're out for 30 minutes a day. They get 15 minutes of stretching and 15 minutes of a lecture, basically on making better life choices. The only printed material they have access to is the Bible. They're fed 3 times a day, a fairly low protein diet, because it's very expensive to feed 70,000 inmates. And the other interesting thing is all the gang members from different, even rival gangs, are commingled. Why? Because there's no hierarchy, there's no recognition of what gang they're with, and they know how much they will suffer if they misbehave and they go to the hole if they try to flex up. So they have broken them as gang members, and it's really satisfying to see. President Trump has been complaining about El Salvador sending a lot of their gang members up. They haven't been sending. Certainly gang members, if they were in El Salvador, are deathly afraid of being caught and sent there, because they will spend the rest of their life in that facility. I spoke to a number of English speakers, illegals that had come and joined the gang and done bad things in LA or DC or Chicago or Boston or New York. And they'd been caught by U.S. law enforcement, deported, and sent there. And El Salvador is taking care of their end of the bargain, putting these scumbags away for the rest of their lives. Now, it's interesting. Bukele was elected on a law enforcement platform, and he has delivered. They've taken it from the worst murder rate in the Western Hemisphere to one that is actually safer than Prince William County, the county that surrounds the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, where the FBI crime lab is. That is how much they've taken down crime. If they've taken out the people doing the crimes and taken them away from the population, and alas, you have a much, much safer society. The State Department still lists El Salvador as a Tier 1 danger zone, dangerous country. That is indeed not the case, but they have financial incentive to do so because they all get an extra bonus for being in a war zone country while they're deployed there. So that's wrong. That needs to be fixed. El Salvador is extremely safe. There's people walking around day and night with their phones out, moving around the country. There's an enormous feeling of national pride and hope and optimism, and their economy is rebounding. And they're doing some good economic reforms. They've solved the security thing, and I came away very, very optimistic that a law enforcement, law and order, good governance, right? Mark, a few months ago I said we have millions of people coming to America illegally because they're fleeing bad governance. That was the case in El Salvador before. Now people are leaving the United States, El Salvador nationals, going back to El Salvador because El Salvador got its governance program right. If more countries emulated that, it makes my case. People will move anywhere in the world for good governance to avoid their kids or themselves being murdered, pillaged, raped, and avoiding the mayhem. So I come away from El Salvador very optimistic. It is in good hands. He was just elected by the highest majority. I think he was reelected with like 85% of the vote, a legitimate election. It's pretty exciting to be El Salvadoran now.
So I've got so many questions. One of the things I've always thought about President Trump during his first term was he used common sense innovations and applied it to policy where politicians they aren't even capable of such thinking. Everything you just described about the protocols for imprisoning these gang members just makes so much sense. It just sounds like common sense solutions. Where did Bukele get these innovations? And don't you think this is going to serve as the textbook for how countries that have been overrun by gangs could approach it in the future?
Well, that's the other thing. They got no help from the U.S. on this at all. No financial help, no advice, because the prevailing State Department, big government approach is to be kind and soft on crime. And I come away from that visit thinking maybe that's how the rest of our prisons should be run, to make them a truly miserable place to be. Take away the weights, take away the hierarchy, make it very clear. I spent, the warden took us around, and he said if someone reaches out or someone calls out to him that's was part of the hierarchy before, he doesn't even acknowledge them. All gang members are treated the exact same. It doesn't matter what their hierarchy in the gang was. So the prison staff has worked very hard to destroy the infrastructure and the hierarchy, the tribe of those gangs, and it has worked. And again, U.S. provides no financial help. And in fact, the fact is, and we said this before, the NGO corruption that we have from the United States of funding, so many NGOs that operate in all these countries are literally operating mostly adverse to the interests of the people in that country. And again, that is something a Republican administration has to get a hold on, has to break up the very corrupt money laundering operation of Congress appropriating all this money, it going to very left-wing, destructive organizations that are undermining these countries that are trying to do the right thing. In the case of El Salvador, the population demanded law and order, and President Bukele has delivered it, and people are voting with their feet and returning to the country, and returning with themselves, with their families, and with money. They're coming back to retire. It's a significant good news story without any U.S. help.
Doesn't make sense to me. Understood. What doesn't make sense is, the gangs in countries like El Salvador, they become, such a part of the cultural fabric. So that way, young males entering their formative years, to survive, they've got to join the gangs. I just don't understand how the gangs allowed Bukele to be elected in the first place. Why wasn't he assassinated, which is what you would have expected to take place?
It was a very dangerous first few years. That was definitely a war, and he had to roll the entire military out to go after certain gang neighborhoods, and he stuck to it. And again, that takes it does not take a soft-necked, mealy-mouthed leader. It was either he was going to win or the gangs were going to win. And it actually gives me hope that even a country like Mexico can be saved, which has an even bigger gang and cartel problem, because those kind of now the gangs that were in El Salvador were mostly territorial gangs. They were in the drug trade, but they were not as big as the Sinaloa, Gulf, Tijuana cartels. But again, law and order works. It's what the population wants. It's what they demanded. And it's what America should insist on as well.
Yeah, that's for sure. We've got the leading Democrats, the new ticket of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are effectively in favor of emptying out our prisons, enabling violent crime, and then you've got this Latin American country showing the America what the model should be and taking the lead. I can see a 47th president, Donald Trump, wanting to export Bukele's policies, his protocols for gangs and for prisons, and wanting to export those to other countries in the region. Now, naturally, Bukele's got his detractors. Supposedly, among those imprisoned are thousands of innocent men. It's hard to imagine with the gang culture that anybody's that innocent. And now, evidently, he's also
Mark. Let me answer that. Let me answer that one right now, Mark. It's very simple to identify an MS-13 guy, because if they have the gang tattoos on, they have killed to join the gang. You can't say that's because, and if MS-13 finds someone with the tattoos on that's not part of the gang, they kill them. So it's pretty simple for law enforcement to go looking at somebody, do a body scan, and you see, you have the certain tattoos in your face, in your neck, and your chest. Come with me, senor. They've self-identified, and it's extraordinarily stupid, but made it very easy for them to mop up the gang spillage all over their society. And now, they haven't gotten them all, but the gang members that are still out there are truly in hiding. They are afraid because the population knows law enforcement rules supreme, not the gangs anymore. And so if that gang member shows his face, he's getting wrapped up immediately.
Well, now his next challenge is to try to fix their economy. They've obviously got massive inflation problems. He wants to crack down on price gouging in the country. But, I haven't seen anything that suggests he wants to use price controls like Kamala Harris has proposed for the United States.
The reason they have inflation is because it's a dollarized economy. And so when our idiot political elites start spending even more money than we have and drives inflation, it exports that inflation down to El Salvador. So again, those are legitimate problems. And again, it's dangerous to be a friend of America sometimes.
Yeah, look, I knew Bukele was really making a difference when a colleague of mine who is a real estate developer said he was looking. This is an American based in mid-Atlantic U.S., builds very expensive homes. And he was looking for real estate deals in El Salvador. And I thought, wow, that just says it all, that an American is looking to make an investment in El Salvador instead of somewhere in the U.S. because of the future opportunities he sees and the future value of real estate he may purchase today. So looks to me like if you apply the Rudy Giuliani principle, broken windows, which is if you got broken windows and you don't focus on the small things, you're not going to fix the potential for economic development. So now it sounds like he's also going to create generational shift for economic development as well.
Yes, there's other videos of flying over a geothermal plant. Truly the greenest form of energy is to drill a hole in the side of a volcano and tap a magma pocket, and you pump water in, and it comes out as extremely hot water, and it becomes steam. And they have many hundreds of megawatts of electricity generated that way, and they're looking to do more of those plants. Again, I would say a solid investment, a green investment, and the gift that keeps on giving as they need to transform their economy. But he's right. He's got a challenge. He definitely fixed the security issue, and voters always have short memories. And now they're going to say, what are you going to do for me this time? Now he's got to fix the economy. They got to do land reform. I think they're going to bring in the right kind of advice for fixing the lowest rungs in the ladder of capitalism so that all the poorest of El Salvadorans can start climbing and gaining in the capital markets.
So, Erik, let's exit on this. We now have in South America, we've got two shining examples of what's possible in Bukele in El Salvador and, of course, Milei in Argentina. Do you think they are going to be the exceptions or the rule in the future South America?
I think they are quickly becoming the benchmark of how you turn around economies. Milei is going gangbusters in trying to fix his economy. He didn't have as much of a crime issue. but he has a bureaucrat issue, and he does have a lot of a very entrenched special interests that he's going to have to battle through. So there's going to be more that come, and it's going to be a matter of governments choosing good governance and fixing the ladder of capitalism so people can climb, and not doing the Soviet model, which is certainly what Nicaragua and Cuba and Venezuela and even some aspects of Colombia are up to. So it's always a good war of ideas, and that is a struggle worth having, because literally there's almost 1 billion people in the Western Hemisphere. So let's sort it out for them.
And the notion that we could have net emigration of Salvadorans from the United States back to El Salvador is fascinating to me, but it speaks volumes about the change that he's created.
Yes, that's happening. People are actually moving back there because of better governance now.
Unbelievable. Last word from you, Erik, on this field report from El Salvador.
I had a great time there. Also, the surfing is fantastic. There's a fantastic surfing culture on the Pacific coast. Very cheap, good food, some really cool surfing resorts, and I will definitely be back soon.
Look, this is why you stay tuned to Off Leash, folks. You're never going to get a better field report than from Erik Prince. For now, that's it for Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. Until next segment, thanks.